Hello, children of God. It is time for another test, and this is your review video for Unit 4.1, Introduction to Spirituality. Boy, are we going to have fun. So, let's get started. Before we do get started, though, I want to remind you, as always, all the notes, all the warm-ups, everything for this unit are posted on Edline in one nice little place called Notes and Assignments, where you can find everything you might need for your notebook or to study for this test. With that in mind, let's go on through. So I've written in some of these things from our review sessions in class, but I'll talk through. Maybe I'll write in some of them as we go through. But let's go ahead and get started. So spirituality is having to do with anything that is spiritual, our connection to things that aren't physical, that you can't perceive with your five senses. So it's kind of like exploring the world and the universe, but without using your five physical senses of sight, touch, hearing, taste, and I'm missing one. But anyway, without those five senses, using your interior senses, your imagination, your will, your conscience, your memory, your intellect, all those sorts of things. You're using those to explore the world instead of your five senses. Religion, and also spirituality is much more, as opposed to religion, is much more personal. Spirituality is like your personal search for that meaning in a relationship with God, whereas religion tends to be more about the community that you're a part of. They certainly, I think they go together. Some people don't, but I certainly would argue that they do, and so would Christianity would agree with me on that. We talked about secularism, individualism, and materialism as three very important aspects of American culture in notes number 2. And we talked about how not all of American culture is bad. There's no culture that's totally good or totally bad. They line up sometimes with Christian values and sometimes not so much. But secularism is, we often talk about as the separation of church and state, but probably a more complete way of talking about it is the separating or sectioning off of religion from public life or other aspects of society. Now, that can be good because it grows out of a desire to respect each person's belief and conscience, but it can be bad because it can kind of say, oh, religion should stay in its own private sphere, its own private place. You shouldn't bring your religious thoughts into public. Kind of has like a prejudice against religious thought. And also, it can kind of imply that all spiritualities are equal. And if you've studied very much spiritualities, I think it's not hard to see that that's not true. Where is the study guide? Here it is. So I'm actually gonna jump down here to number 10, because this is where we talk about the good and the bad aspects. So we talked about the good and the bad aspects of secularism. Let's talk about individualism. Individualism is the focus on the value of the individual as opposed to the value of the group. And what's good about that is that it respects people's individuality and their rights and their beliefs, and helps them to be responsible for stuff. And that's great that we value individual rights. But it can be bad because it can tend to value one's own opinion over the opinions of others and think that I'm more important than other people and my own ideas are better than, ideas that have been around for thousands of years. Materialism is a focus on the material goods in the world as opposed to the spiritual goods of the world and material things. Now that can be good in America because we see it kind of as the American dream, that we're driving for success and a car and a good education and a place where we can take care of stuff and get everything that we want and have success. But that can be bad because it can imply that those material things can bring us happiness. So that's kind of bad because there's lots of examples of lots of very rich people with lots of material things who are still very much not happy. They still have that desire. Speaking of desire, well, let's not get to desire quite yet. We're almost there. Detachment is one of our prerequisites for spirituality that we talked about in Notes 3, and it is a spiritual separation from the goods of this world. So it's okay to have physical things like iPhones and water bottles and computers and with optical mice and all sorts of things. It's good to have those things, but we should recognize that they're not really ultimately super important. We should have a certain detachment from those things. And lots of the saints we studied have had that sort of detachment. Paschal mystery is the mystery of Christ's death and resurrection. Like, how did God save the world through this horrible, terrible event of an innocent man who also happened to be God, suffering and being tortured and dying? And that means that in all bad situations of evil and suffering, that God is able to bring good things out of them. He doesn't cause evil, but he is able to use evil for his own purposes. Evil doesn't thwart God. Number 2, what's meant by the following terms? They're synonyms. That means they all mean the same thing. Sainthood, holiness, the best version of yourself. It's being the person that God made you to be, the holy person, the saint version of yourself, who you really are deep down underneath all your sin and temptation and yuckiness and hurt and pain, the person God really made you to be. Aquinas, taken from Plato, says that people tend to substitute one of 4 things for God. Those are power, pleasure, money, and honor. This is from Notes 2, by the way. The following terms are different names for fundamental human desire. What is that desire? Sometimes it's called the holy longing, the God-shaped hole, the search for meaning in life, the restlessness in our souls. They all refer to the same thing, and it's the desire that every human being has for meaning and purpose and legacy in their life, for their life to have some sort of meaning. And Christians would say that this is the desire for God. What did Plato and Augustine think about what would fulfill this desire? This is in Notes both 1 and 2. They say, Plato would say truth, goodness, and beauty. And what is the most true, beautiful, and good thing we can think of? Augustine would say God, that he is truth, he is beauty, he is goodness, and all other things that are true, beautiful, and good are some reflection of God's ultimate truth, goodness, and beauty. And if you think about it, anything that you like, you tend to like it because either it's true, it's good, or it's beautiful. What is the relationship between spirituality and religion? I would say spirituality without religion is lost, because you can tend to believe whatever you want, and without much guidance, you can say, oh, my spirituality is eating bacon cheeseburgers every day, and that just makes me feel great about myself. So it's not going to challenge you much necessarily. You can kind of make God into whatever you want. But I would say religion without spirituality is dead. It's just going through the motions. If you don't have that personal devotion to it, you're just kind of doing what other people say. So there's got to be a healthy balance of religion and spirituality. Jesus was actually very much against people who were religious but not spiritual. He calls out the Pharisees. He calls them whitewashed tombs, meaning like they're dead inside, but on the outside they've been painted all white and pretty, but on the inside they're spiritually dead. Number 7, explain the following quote: the glory of God is the perfection of the creature. Matthew Kelly, the author of our homework, The Authentic Life, in chapter 6 of his book, Rediscovering Catholicism, gives a great definition of this. It was in one of your homeworks. Also in Notes 3, we talk about this. Let's pull that up. And basically, what we said is that, where is it? Here we go. Yeah. No. This is it. Okay. So the glory of God is the perfection of the creature, meaning when what God created does what it's supposed to do, that glorifies God. Meaning when we are saints, we are glorifying God. When we are being fully alive, when we are being the person that God made us to be, we're living for the infinite glory of God. And so that's why St. Ignatius said the goal of the Christian life is to glorify God and the salvation of my soul. The two go hand in hand. The first thing we got to do to glorify God is draw close to him so we can be saved, and then we go out and glorify other people. Or glorify God through serving other people, I should say. What is the next question? Number 7 we just did. Number 8, what is the goal of Christian spirituality and the Christian life in general? To glorify God, and you could also say the salvation of my soul. Sorry if I made the screen shake. Sorry if I made the screen shake. We're having an earthquake. Number 9, when developing one's spirituality, why it is important to recognize both one's brokenness and one's God-given goodness. This is also in Notes number 3. This is super important because if you never recognize your brokenness, you don't know that you need to be saved. And really prideful people who don't think there's anything wrong with them and they don't need anybody's help, a lot of times those are the hardest people to convince that they need God's love. But we also need to recognize our own goodness, because sometimes people can be so down on themselves and not see the goodness that God put in them that they just think they're hopeless and they give up on God and on everybody else and then live miserable lives. So both of those are good. We need to recognize our goodness within ourselves, that we're wonderfully and beautifully made by God, as Psalm 139 says, but we also need to recognize our need for God. Number 10, we already went through all these, so let's talk about number 11, the essay. The what? The essay. Yes, you're going to have to write an essay. It's going to be a big essay. It's bigger than the multiple choice section. So, I suggest making an outline. This is how I suggest outlining it. I went over this in class, I think. I would start off with an introduction with just a couple sentences. Then I would explain the American Buddhist and Christian answers to the question, what is the relationship between desire and suffering? So I would explain the American, the Buddhist, and the Christian approach. Oh, look at that, ABC. How about that? Okay, I would explain that in one paragraph. I wouldn't take forever on it. Just one or two sentences to kind of encapsulate and wrap up each one, okay? Then the question asks, then explain what you think about the question, what aspects of these answers do you most agree with or disagree with? Be sure to support your claims with well-reasoned arguments and real-world examples. So then I would have a paragraph on what I agree with and a paragraph on what I disagree with. I would just pick one or two things from each to agree with or disagree with, and then I would have a conclusion where I kind of wrap up. And that's what I would do. I kind of outlined it for you here a little bit. When you're saying what you agree with or disagree with, I would say just pick like one or two things that you really agree with. So, I really agree with the American point of view that, desire, pushes us towards our happiness, and if we go after it and we work hard, then we can really achieve happiness. I've seen that happen because my uncle came to this country really poor, and he worked really hard, and nobody could keep him down, and he started off living in a truck, but now he's done really well for himself, and he has a happy family and all those sorts of things. So those are the sort of examples I'm looking for, okay? Or you could say, the American worldview that, the desire for material goods in the American dream is really misguided. An example of this is Britney Spears, who was famous at a young age and got everything she ever wanted and had lots of money and all that sort of thing, but then ended up being miserable. This proves that something more like the Buddhist point of view or the Christian point of view is actually more accurate. So that would be a good way to, those sorts of examples are what I'm looking for. And I know I just did this because I was speaking off the top of my head, but stylistically, and I won't take off points for this, but just this is good practice for academic writing. Try not to, when you're making your opinion, don't say, well, this is my opinion, just state it, okay? So don't say I think, I believe, my opinion. Please don't ever say I feel. We're not trying to educate you to feel, we're trying to educate you to think. I mean, maybe feel too, but here we're trying to get you to think. We don't want you to feel in your essay, we want you to think in your essay, okay? I want you to feel in your interactions with other people. All right, so try to find ways to say this is my opinion without saying this is my opinion. Say, the Christian point of view on suffering is a strong point of view, or the Christian point of view on desire is really lacking. Say things like that. State what you think, but don't say, I think my opinion is, etc. Okay? Again, I'm not going to take off for that, but it's just good practice in academic writing. All right? So again, this is all in Notes 1, by the way. So let's take a look at Notes 1. So the American culture says that the desire that we have is the drive for happiness. We call it the pursuit of happiness oftentimes. And the solution to this desire is to satisfy it. And then you'll be happy once you actually have, the wife and the job and the car, the boyfriend, whatever it is that you want. And once you have that, you'll be happy. A Buddhist or to some extent Hindu point of view would be that desire is the root of suffering. And then if you didn't have desire, you wouldn't suffer. So like if, I'm suffering because I really want to be popular and I don't have any friends. Well, if you got rid of that desire to be popular and you were just content with who you are, you wouldn't be suffering anymore. That makes a lot of sense, okay? And that's why their goal is to reach this state of total detachment and freedom from desire called nirvana. And you can see Buddha there encapsulated in this little nirvana bubble he's created from all these temptations, worldly temptations outside himself. Now, the Christian point of view is that ultimately what we desire is truth, goodness, and beauty. And God is the most true goodness and good and beautiful thing. And so ultimately what we're desiring is God. And everything that we desire, whether that be, the food or whatever, it's some aspect of God that we're really desiring. But sin has messed that up and caused us to seek lesser things. Okay, so sin has made us go after lesser things and messed us up. So our goal is to be saved, and that's what's going to save us. Okay? So I think that just about wraps it up. Good luck on your test. See me if you have questions. All right?